Hey friends, welcome to Flite Tech. I'm Josh. In this video, we're going to be showing you how to build the wings, the nacelles, and also install the motors of our B-17. Now, if you're scratch building along with me, or whether you're building from the speed build kit, let's go ahead and get all our materials in order. That's going to mainly be the pieces for the nacelles, the wings. Also, we're going to want electronics for our motor as well. Let's get our materials in order, and we'll get started. So the first thing that we'll start with our wing assembly is going to basically be starting with one half of the wing. Now the nice thing is once we complete one half of the wing, it's the exact same process on the other side. So we're going to take our good sweet time on this first wing to give you every step in great detail, and then all you simply need to do is repeat it to build the second half of the wing. Make sure you locate the pieces that you see here right in front of you, and we're going to go ahead and weed those out. We'll then identify the pieces, and feel free to pause the video to make sure that all your pieces look just like ours before moving on to the next step. And now that we have our pieces prepped, let's go ahead and identify them. First, we have our main wing section with our double bevel going down the middle, and also the cavity cleared out for our trailing edge C-channel. We have our landing gear support with a little hole knockout for our landing gear pucks. We have our center middle spar. We have our servo reinforcement. And then we have our two main spars that are identical. Over here we have our dihedral gauge, and we're only going to need this when we're joining our two wings, but make sure you don't lose this piece. Feel free to pause the video at this moment, make sure all your pieces look like this, and then we can move on to the next step. First, let's go ahead and prepare our three main spars here. All these are going to be assembled the exact same way. We're basically going to be folding these over 180 degrees, putting glue on one side and gluing them together. Let's go ahead and do that right now. We'll go ahead and start with our main middle spar here. You're going to notice that these kind of look like rectangles, but they actually aren't. They have some bevels to them for the dihedral. And we're going to be very careful on how we place this on the wing to make sure that we're putting the right side on it. There's one. Same process on the other side. We really wanted to standardize all the techniques on this B-17 to make sure that although it looks advanced, it's still very easy to build. There we go. Something I like to do is I like to locate the side that's been folded over. In other words, this is where the score cut was, which is going to be red on your plans. And I'm going to make sure those are all pointing in the same direction. And there we go. Reason being is because there's actually a slight amount of dihedral that's cut into each one of these, and we want these all pointing inwards, and we want the point that's folded over, that's basically where the score cut was, to be facing down against the leading edge. This is really going to just basically help us place it exactly where we want it. Now that we have our main spars cut, let's go ahead and put our attention towards the main portion of the wing. First thing we want to do is do our C-folds here. We're always going to practice our C-folds, just bending 180 degrees around, making sure that the cavity that we cleared out has no resistance and it can easily fold flat against the bottom surface of the wing. Once we're happy with that, a thin bead of glue is all we need to be able to fasten that down. There we go. And one more here. I always never take it for granted. We always test fit and make sure we get that motion locked in before we fasten it down. Now we have two additional doublers that we're going to be gluing down for strength. One's going to be for our servos, the other is going to be for our landing gear plate. Let's go ahead and first line up our servo. You're going to notice that there's a non-90 degree angle that's going to go right up against the etch mark of where our spars go, and it's going to line perfectly in the middle of our servo cutout. The easiest way to be able to put this down is I like to put the glue down on the etch part. And the reason for that is you don't accidentally put glue down where the servo is going to be. All we simply need to do is line it right over our etch lines, which are going to be blue on our plans, and let it dry. Same process now on our landing gear plate. The only difference here is you can mount this one way or the other. The hole that we have cut out, we want to be furthest away from the leading edge. So we're just going to test fit this, make sure we're happy with where everything goes. That looks wonderful. Now I'm going to hold this in my hand. Notice I'm putting glue on the portion of the wing. That way I'm not putting glue where we don't need it. I'm going to line it right over the etch marks. Little wiggle, kind of spread that glue around. And then we'll let it dry. Now while that piece is drying, we can put our attention towards our main spars. The first spar I'm going to go ahead and work on is going to be the smallest middle spar here. And again, you're going to notice that there's kind of a chamfered end in that's going to be pointing towards us, towards the center of the wing. And then also, the fold over where our score cut is going to be down firmly against the bottom of the wing. What you'll notice then is that this angle here is going to allow the wing to raise up and join it in the middle. Once we're happy with the fit, a bead of glue right down the middle is all we need. And you're going to see that we have 2 etch lines right here. We're simply going to line that up and then press it in place and let it dry. Same process on the next piece. Again, we have all these folds facing the right direction. We're just going to reconfirm that this is where our score cut was. That's going to be facing down. That's going to line right up against the edge line here. And after we're happy with the fit, I'm going to grab it, I'm going to put my glue down, and I'm going to press it into place. Now this is the same process as our big made-to-order B-17 that's coming out. The only difference is on this rear spar, we're going to have a plywood spar that's going to go over it to give us the extra strength, because the extra large monster B-17 can handle a tremendous amount of weight. We don't want that wing to fold, and we want that extra strength to be able to handle the payload. And one final step. Again, we're looking for the score cut side. We're going to give it a quick test fit. If at any time you have any kind of little glue globs that are kind of keeping that spar from coming down, just scrape it out with your finger. Again, we're lining up with the etch mark, nice and neat. Everything's pointing in the right direction. The thinner part of the spar is towards the tip, the thicker part is towards the center. Right down the middle. Although this wing is carrying 4 motors, it's no more complicated to build than some of our absolute simplest, easy to build trainer aircraft. The only additional step that I want to do here is I want to go ahead and marry this landing gear doubler plate to the spar here. I'm simply going to do that by putting a bead of glue between the plate and the spar. Now that everything is dried, I'm going to go ahead and take the flat of my hand and I'm going to place it on the outer surface of the wing, and I'm going to slowly let the wing kind of crinkle in. Now these are going to be score cuts on your plans, which are going to be marked in red, and you don't really need to open this up with barbecue skewers or pencils like we used to do on some of our older models. Just let this naturally crush in, and then we're going to carefully bring this around. And if you find yourself having to put too much pressure on the leading edge to be able to get it where you want, go back and make that bevel cut a little bit deeper. You want a little bit of resistance, but not so much that this portion here is at a very sharp angle. You should actually see where these main spars, the second crease here, kind of lines up beautifully right over the center spar, and that this section here is flush. If it's not, there's a good likelihood that this bevel is too aggressive and you need to go ahead and take some more away. This looks wonderful. I'm really happy with the way it is. You can see that this portion here just touches just above the spar, about maybe 1/8 of an inch, and that's perfect. That gives us room for adjustment. And then this portion is nice and flat. To lock in the shape of this airfoil, we're going to go ahead and put a thin bead of glue right down these score cuts. Now we want to be really careful when we do this to make sure that we don't accidentally glue this shut prematurely. So the ribbon's going to be very, very thin, and you're going to see me kind of bounce on the top surface of the wing so it doesn't actually adhere to the spars quite yet. I got plenty of glue in my glue gun. I'm just gonna grab an extra glue stick in case I need it. There we go. And we can do this all three, or we can just do one at a time, or we can do two at a time. It does not matter. This is a common technique we've been doing for many years, so if you've built before with us, you probably saw this step coming. This is gonna give us an immense amount of strength, and all we're gonna do is we're gonna bring this right back around. We're gonna bring down to the table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, lift up, back down to the table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, lift up, and again. We're gonna do this 4 or 5 times, and this is a really good opportunity to kind of make sure that the wing has the shape that we want. Again, I'm focusing on the edge here. I'm focusing right where the spar is, making sure everything lines up beautifully. There we go. Now when we open this up, you're gonna see that the wing actually holds its own shape, and that's exactly what we want. It gives us a lot of strength, and it also locks in the shape that we need. If you're happy with everything, now's the time that we're gonna go ahead and lock this down. Now there's a lot of glue that we're gonna lay down at once, and we don't wanna take the chance of it drying out prematurely. So make sure that you have a glue gun that can handle it. This is our FT300. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a stripe down the leading edge, and then I'm gonna do the main spars, and then I'm gonna come back and do the trailing edge afterwards. This assures I have plenty of glue and plenty of heat to do what I need to do. Oop, I got plenty of glue still. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and lay a bead of glue. I'm gonna kind of hop over these little dots here. Reason is I don't want a little Play-Doh factory action going on. Nice thick bead of glue right down there. See, there's no reason to rush or panic. And I'm also gonna get this little mini spar right here that goes up against our Bombay. Gives us plenty of strength. Okay. Now I'm gonna fold this over. I'm gonna use the flats in my hands. I'm gonna press this down into place. And I'm just gonna kind of lay my hand right over this top spar area. We have plenty of time to make sure everything's fitting the way we want it, and it is. And now we're gonna hold this down flat and give it a good minute to a minute and a half to fully dry. The last thing we want is for this to kind of clam open and our wings to not be the same. Notice I'm not pushing down and denting the foam at all. Everything I have is kind of spread out wide over the foam and nice and flat. And after about a minute to a minute and a half, you can see that we can release tension and nothing's gonna open up on us. Now we come back to the trailing edge, it's gonna be very easy for us to basically be able to lift this up just gently, put the tip of our glue gun right underneath it, and then lock down this edge. We're gonna go and do that right now. All I simply need to do is lift this up. That's gonna place a bead of glue about 1/8 inch in, give me just enough to glue it down nice and solid. I'll lift this part up here. Wipe off any extra glue globs that I may have. Now we're gonna hold this down and let it dry. And just like that, we have the left side of our wing complete. Now we're gonna do the exact same steps on the other side, and then ultimately join the two wing halves together. All right, now that we're done with the left wing, we're gonna do the exact same process on the right wing here. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through this, but all it is a matter of repeating the same steps that we just did. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weed out my pieces and cut my double bevels. Always make sure that you cut your double bevels to let your piece go up at least 90 degrees without any resistance. If you feel resistance, just cut a little bit shallower. Now that we have everything weeded out and we have our double bevels, let's go ahead and put our glue down for both our trailing edge and our main spars. With our main spars, we're going to still make sure that the edge that has the score cut is all point in the same direction so we don't accidentally glue our spars on the wrong way. Our landing gear doubler is going to have the hole furthest away from our leading edge. Once we test fit it, put down some glue and glue it in place. And we're just going to take our time and line it right over top of the etch marks, making sure we don't cross the area that the spar is going to be in. Same step for our servo. We're going to make sure that our servo reinforcement plate is on the proper side. We don't want it upside down where it doesn't match up. And once we've lined everything up, we're going to place our glue down on the wing surface and glue it in place. Now we can start gluing our spars down onto our wing surface. I'm going to start with the smallest spar. Again, before I glue anything down, I'm going to confirm that the folded edge is going to be pointing down on the bottom wing surface and that the dihedral here is going to be up towards the center of the wing. Same process on the other two spars. Gonna make sure the fold edge is down. Gonna line it on the inside of the etch mark. Whoops. And one final spar, again folded edge pointed down. We're gonna line it up and test it. I'm gonna put my fingers right by where that opening is because we don't really need glue where the landing gear is gonna go. And just to make sure our landing gear has plenty of strength, we're going to reinforce with a bead of glue between the landing gear plate and the edge of the spar. Make sure you let this fully dry before going on to our next step so none of this accidentally moves as we're folding the wing over. Using the flats of our hands, we're going to slowly curl up the wing surface to make sure we give it a nice airfoil. And as we fold this over, we shouldn't feel too much resistance on our wing. We want to avoid having the wing surface between the leading edge and the first crease being too sharp. So as we sight back this, we should see that this rear section of the upper wing surface lines up or is just a hair in front of the main spar here. And also that the center section here is nice and flush. Once we're happy with the airfoil, make sure we have plenty of hot glue here. I'm going to put a thin ribbon of glue right down into the score cut. Again, you can do this one at a time, two at a time, or all three, depending on your comfort level, or the capacity of your hot glue gun. This is going to hold our airfoil into place and give us a tremendous amount of strength. Now we're going to fold this over. We'll go down for 5 seconds, and then up, down for 5 seconds, and then up. And we're going to repeat this process a couple more times. Now that our airfoil is locked in, we can go ahead and put our attention towards putting a bead of glue down the leading edge, the top of the three main spars. I got plenty of hot glue in my glue gun. Just gonna go right down the line here. And then right on the very top surface of our spars. And there we go. Now we're going to fold this over once again, and we're going to focus that we make sure that we put plenty of pressure on the top of our three main spars. So I'm not doing this with my fingertips, I'm just doing this with the flat of my hands and the flat of my arms. We can look around here and we can see that our placement is exactly where we want it to be. And we're gonna hold this until it's fully dry. Once the top surface is glued down to our spars and our leading edge, we can flip it over 180 degrees, get all our little glue globs off here. And then we're gonna go ahead and lift this up, just put the tip of our hot glue gun right under the trailing edge and put a thin bead of glue all the way down. Now we can hold this down, let it fully dry, and our second wing half is now done. All right, we now have both our left and our right panels for our main wings. We're ready to join those. For that, we're gonna need some tape and our dihedral gauge, and of course, some more glue. Now our dihedral gauge is gonna go under one of the wings, and we're basically gonna be placing it right here. We don't wanna place it on this outer wing, we wanna place it on the inner portion that you see here. To make our wings easier to join together, we're gonna create a tape hinge right here on the bottom surface of the wing. Now you're gonna notice that this top portion kind of fights it. All we simply need to do is just kind of lift this up and let the two crush together. To get this tape hinge, I'm first gonna put a piece of tape down on one half. I'm gonna lift this up ever so slightly, kind of push these together. We want that crush. We basically want under a mild amount of tension. And as we flip it over, you're gonna see that these shingle beautifully together. And as we lift it up, it creates a really tight joint. We don't want there to be a big gap between these two wing surfaces. And if there is maybe one wing that's folded a little bit different and it's just too much resistance, of course you can trim it down. We're just gonna put this dihedral gauge under and make sure we're happy with the way it looks. There we go. And you can see here that one wing is flat against the table and the other wing is lifted up. Now that everything looks like it's lifting good, all we need to do is simply open this up, and I'm gonna focus the majority of my glue on one half. Right down the middle here. Notice that I'm putting it on pretty darn thick. I'm gonna have a scrap piece of foam handy to wipe off any residual. And now I'm gonna repeat that process here. I'm gonna open this up. I'm gonna let these shingle together. We don't have to rush this step at all. I'm gonna place my dihedral gauge right where I showed you just a moment ago. Now I can just take my scrap foam here, wipe off any residual that we may have. There we go. Now I'm gonna let this fully dry, and then I'm gonna come back with a bead of glue on the very top, and I'm gonna smear that in. That's gonna give us a lot of extra strength, and when I top that off with a piece of 2-inch tape, it's gonna lock it in for good. I'm just gonna come back with a bead of glue right on the very top here. Take a scrap piece of foam, doesn't matter which one it is, whoops. There we go. And I'm just gonna let that get nice and wide, almost like a paintbrush. It'll spill down into the crack. Just checking everything. We're gonna give this a good 2 minutes to fully dry, and then we're gonna coat the top with a piece of 2-inch tape. Once there's no more tack to the glue, we can take our 2-inch tape. I'm gonna carefully put a nice stream, I'm gonna carefully put it right over the middle there. And then press it down. Now that we have our wings joined together, this would be a perfect time to cut our ailerons, install our servos, and a lot of the pre-wiring that's going to be needed for our 4 motors. Keep in mind, if you're going to be doing the twin CPAC conversion, where basically the inside motors are running together as a twin engine, and we're basically just leaving the outsides alone, you're only going to need 2 C motors and 1 Power Y. If we're going to be using the 4 motors, which are the budget B motors, you're going to have 2 Power Ys, 1 in each side. Right now we're going to put our attention towards the servos and the servo extensions. So let's go ahead and get those prepared and centered up. So in preparation for installing our servos, I've already pre-centered our servos, and I've also attached the 30cm extensions. Now if you're buying our electronics kit specifically made for the B-17, all of this is going to be included in that electronics kit, along with linkage stoppers. One thing you're going to notice is even though I've pre-centered my servos, I've actually jumped 1 or 2 notches forward to have them look just like this. Now this is a very important step that I don't want you to overshoot. The reason being is this is going to give us something called aileron differential. That means the aileron is going to raise more than it actually lowers. This is really important to give us nice coordinated turns and not have to program your radio or do any advanced features on your transmitter. You can have a very simple radio, but also a very advanced function. This is going to give us nice axial roll without having to have the difficulty of mixing in your rudder. We've already taped up our extension. We've also confirmed that our signal wires and our ground wires and our power wires all line up with each other. All we need to do now is simply guide our servo wires, and we can kind of let gravity help us out. And we're going to go ahead and push this down. And if you notice here, I'm kind of tilting this forward, and the reason is because I want this to go in front of the little center middle spar. So we're going to go ahead and push that down a little bit more. And as we lower this down into place with a little bit of shaking, it's going to slide right on through. Almost there. If we did this right, we'll see our little extension pop out between the center spar and the rear of our main spar. And it's important to take note here that I installed the servo that actually has the arm pointing towards the leading edge. You don't want the arm pointing towards the trailing edge, or it's going to make the servo go down more than it goes up. So make sure your servo looks exactly like what you see here. Here's the leading edge of our wing. Here's the servo arm pointing towards it. Same process on the other side. I always like to kind of straighten out my wires. We're going to start guiding it in. Again, we can kind of use gravity as our friend. Just a little rocking motion. That's all we need. Almost there. Nice thing is I can also look right down the top here and see exactly where I need to go. And there we go. Now that both of our servo wires have been passed through here, let's go ahead and cut our single bevel cut on the aileron side and then reinforce it the same way we did with our elevator with some hot glue. All we simply need to do is open this up 180 degrees. We're going to take our razor blade and just on the one side of the facing paper, cut a 45-degree bevel. Keep this cut as close as possible to the facing paper to make sure that we don't have any binding issues with our foam. Now to add our durability, we can reinforce this with a thin bead of glue right over our hinge line. And we're going to take a scrap piece of foam and wipe off all the excess. I'm going to put a little bit more down right here. What I like to see is just a thin ribbon of glue that's not balled up in any way and is smeared from basically the one side of the facing paper through the middle to the other side. I like to lick my finger and drag it up and down a couple times, and that takes away any kind of tackiness that we may have. Same process on the other side. We're going to open this up 180 degrees. And we're going to cut our 45-degree bevel. check for any resistance, and then reinforce with a bead of hot glue. And just like before, we're going to scrape off all the extra hot glue so we don't have any kind of binding issues. Lick our finger, take away all the tack. Cool. Now, just like before, we're going to go ahead and prepare our control horns and our linkage stoppers. We're going to use the outermost hole on our control horns, and we're going to make sure that we mirror the two linkage stoppers here so we don't have them point in the same direction. I just like to take this to the edge of the table, press down nice and firm, and then press that through. We're going to put a linkage stopper on the back. Press that down. Make sure it turns nice and easy. And finally, just pre-thread our screw down just a little bit to make sure it holds. There we go. Same process on the other side, except we're just going to go through the opposite side. So there's that one pointing this way. We're going to take our barrel and we're going to point it that way. There we go. It's always important to make sure you use the stopper on the other side. And finally, a little grub screw. Now we're going to bring our wing back here. We have an existing Z-bend on the wire that we provide, and then on the other one, we're going to go ahead and cut that, and then we can put a Z-bend with our pliers or our Z-bend tool. Now keep in mind, we give you plenty of wire to actually use a fresh Z-bend for each one, but if you do this technique, you're going to have plenty of wire for future builds or making repairs. I'm going to lift out my servos that we haven't glued in yet. I'm actually going to push this in from the bottom. I'm going to go to the furthest out hole because I want as much throw as possible. I'm going to be using the FT Aura 5 board, and the specific tune on this gives us a basically wild control for aerobatics all the way down to a mild experience for beginners. So we don't have to worry about dialing down the throws. Now I can slide our control horn all the way through. I'm going to line this up here, put it right into the slot, and that should let the barrel of our control horn go directly over our hinge line. I'm going to hold this neutral, mark it about 1/4 inch beyond. Now I can lift it up and cut it right where my finger lies. You don't want this wire to be too long because if it is, it can bottom out against the surface of the wing and cause the control horn to rip out or the surface to not fully move. We'll give it one last test fit here. Again, I'm holding this nice and neutral, and you can see it's just about 1/4 inch, maybe a little less on the outside. That's perfect. Now that we're happy with that, I'll put a bead of glue right down over the slot. I can take my control horn and slide it into place. We always want to make sure that the barrel of our control horn or the holes for the control horn itself are directly over the hinge line to give us even proper throw. And now that we're happy and we got the control horn down, we can simply lift up our servo. We'll put a drop of glue under each flange, and then we'll press it down into place. There we go. Now that our servo is glued down, we can lock down our linkage stopper. And we're ready to do the exact same process on the other side. Now because we have these back in the store, I'm going to use my favorite Z-bend pliers here. All I have to do is take the very edge, line it up with the edge of the pliers, squeeze down once, and we got a perfect Z-bend. I'm going to lift my servo out carefully. I'm going to rotate it up and in, and then I press it down back in place. Notice I'm using basically just one wire will do all 4 of our control surfaces very nicely. There we go. And I'm just gonna mark this here. Hold that level. Gonna mark about a 1/4 inch out. Lift it up. And we'll cut it. And one final test. Holding this neutral, everything looks good. Now we can lock down our control horn with a bead of glue. Press this through. Put a little bead of glue on that part. Wipe off any extra. And once our control horn is dry, we can lock in our servo with a drop of glue under each flange. Now that our servo is glued down, we can lock down our linkage stopper. While we have our wing upside down here, this would be the perfect time to glue our landing gear pucks in. Now it's really important that we glue this down in the right orientation, and these little dots are going to help us. We should be able to easily drop our landing gear pucks right into the holes and glue them down. If for any reason you have any glue globs that are underneath there that are keeping you from doing that, just go ahead and carve them and remove them. I'm just going to do a quick test fit. Make sure that the whole surface all the way around is good. And also, when we slide our main landing gear puck in, the landing gear holes are all the way closest to the leading edge. Now that we're happy with that, we can lift it up, and we're going to put a nice healthy bead of glue all the way around. Because we're going to be carrying lots of big Bombay loads and having fun with it, we don't want this part to come loose. That's going to squeeze out on our flange. There we go. And I can even go around the perimeter with a bead of glue if I want. Let's do the exact same process now on the other side. Again, we always make sure we test fit it. Those holes are going to line up. The landing gear puck wire is as close as possible to the leading edge. Plenty of glue all the way around it. Put a little bit of glue here. And we'll squeeze it down in place. Wipe off any residual and even put a bead of glue on the outer edges. Now that we have our landing gear plugs installed, let's go ahead and flip this over. We'll route our power Y harnesses, and then we can start building our nacelles. Now it's most convenient, especially when we're doing the 4-motor configuration, to get our power Y harnesses routed before we go ahead and move on to our next step. This is going to give us the ability to be able to easily plug in our ESCs, and we want our ESCs in front of basically the nacelles so they can get easy airflow, but also if we ever need to change them out, we can easily access them. So in our electronics kit for our 4-motor conversion, we have 2 power Ys. Each side of the motors are actually going to plug into basically one battery, whether that's a 2200 or my personal favorite, a 3300 on each side. I'm just going to start from the furthest hole away, and I can easily push our wires all the way through, and the area where it's going to exit is actually going to be right in this notch that you see here. Now all I need to do to get the power to the other wire is I'm just going to pick one of these, and I'm going to pull it on through, and I'm going to pull it out this section here. Let's go ahead and do the same process on the other side. All right, we're just going to pass this on through. Only jostling we need to do is just to get it over the landing gear plate, and I'll guide all the way up to the front side. Same process as before. Just grab one of these leads, and pull it through. Now, at certain times of our build, it may be beneficial to kind of tuck these back in a little bit to keep the wires out of our way, especially as we're gluing on our nacelles. But having this ready and accessible here is really going to make our life a lot easier. And to control our different motors here, we're going to use 2 servo Y harnesses to basically be able to connect our ESCs together. So for that reason, we're going to go ahead and pass this on through, and we just want to get this down enough where we can basically make our connection, and then we can pull the wire the rest of the way through. So I'll just go ahead and grab this. We'll pass our servo Y down through. All the rotation's all we need. And this is basically spaced just right where we can easily leave one of these wires here and still grab the other edge. Almost there. And there we go. And I'm going to grab one of these wires here. And basically what I like to do is I want to be able to make sure that I can easily grab this wire here and pull it out, and I can grab it here. I can do that. I can lock that down with a little piece of tape, and that's going to hold it there until I'm ready for it. All right, got a little piece of tape there. And I'm just going to tape this to my power Y, and now I have it. I can carefully tuck all the rest of this right back in this cavity, and now it's ready for me to pull out as soon as I have the nacelles on, and I'm ready to put on my motors. I'm also just going to take this other power Y here, and I'm tuck it into the center spar section. Let's go and route our power Y, and at that point we can put our wing aside and start working on our nacelles. All right, I'm just going to tape this one side down. And I can reach back. And I can grab this side. There we go. Then finally, we'll take our last wire and we'll pull it out here. All this can be done later on, but it's just the easiest way to do it is to do it now, and then it's ready for you. And finally, I'm just going to tape these guys here. And as you can see, all of our wires are routed exactly where we need them. Let's go ahead and put our wing aside, and we'll start building our nacelles. Now with our wing mainly formed together here, now it's time to put our attention towards the nacelles. Now the best thing about this is every nacelle builds the exact same, and you don't have to worry about getting left sides and right sides mixed up because all that is keyed into the actual main pieces. So for that reason, we're going to show you one nacelle. Feel free to rewind the video and watch this over and over and over again as you do each one. But what you're going to find is it's incredibly easy and goes very quickly. This actually mimics very much like what we did with our front and rear canopy when we built our fuselage. Let's go and identify our pieces, and then we'll go ahead and prepare them, and then we'll build our nacelle together. First, we have the main sections of our inner nacelles. You're going to notice that they're longer in size. We have the left and right outer nacelles. We have our 4 firewall doublers. And then we have our outer left and right lower nacelle and our inner left and right lower nacelle. These are actually somewhat optional. You can put them in if you want to, but they really look beautiful. And again, it's only one piece of foam. The 4 pieces that we have right here are the decorative rings that are going to go in after we get our motors and everything in, basically right before we're ready to paint our airplane. We don't want to put these in prematurely because we're going to be setting the wing down on the main nacelles, and we don't want to dent these. For that reason, these are actually going to be put aside until everything's installed and we have our motors on. Let's go ahead and clear off the table here, and we're just going to leave one nacelle and our firewall doubler. And just like before, we're going to make sure that these etch marks that you see here in the big open sections have a light score through them so they easily peel off. Now that we've done our light score, we can simply peel these up on all 4 of our rows. Again, we're pulling up 90 degrees here. That's the easiest way to get a nice clean release from our facing paper. Now you're going to notice here that we have these etch marks here, angle back, and then ultimately the etch marks where our nacelle connects together is going to be the furthest back. This is actually going to give us the thrust angle we need to have the proper angle on the motors so our plane tracks nice and true. So keep it in mind as we glue our firewall in, the firewall is actually going to be angled back slightly, and we're going to be rolling this up and using these reference lines to get it at the exact right angle. Before we do that, let's go ahead and put a little bit of a pre-curl in these 2 sections here so it makes your life a little bit easier when we join it. I'm just going to simply take this down to the table, and we don't have to get a lot. And if you like to kind of use your thumb and 4 fingers, that's fine too. Another cool trick is you can kind of lean the one edge off the table, use the table as our friend, and curl this around. Same process on the other side. Again, you can kind of see I'm using the table, my fingers. I'm not trying to do it all at once. I'm just getting ourselves a nice round curve. This is a lot easier to do. I just simply like to wrap it around my thumb. There we go. You probably already know what to do with this piece. We're just simply going to fold it in half, make sure that all of our tick marks line up, and then we can provide a bead of glue right around the ring. And then we can glue it together. Now, there's really no up and down, left or right on this, but you will see these tick marks and you will see the center reference mark. So whether it's the folded edge or the open edge, make sure that you line these up when you glue this down, and also start to favor it rotating back just a little bit so it can already start to meet up with our edges. I'm going to go ahead and place a bead of glue right on this portion here. I'm going to line it up with my etch marks in the center line. And I'm really just going to focus for the first probably 30 or so seconds on pushing this down. After about 30 seconds, I can rotate it back ever so slightly, and then I can line up my marks on both sides. You can kind of see if I hold this at an angle here, you can see that we have our reference marks lined up all the way around, and we don't have to worry about the top because if we get the sides right, the top's going to be perfect. I'm holding this up in the air just to show you. I'm actually going to bring this back to the table, use the table as my friend. I'm going to hold all this in place until the bottom is fully dry. All right, after about a minute here, we can let this open up. Our angle's already locked in. And now we can put a bead of glue all the way up to where it starts curving on both sides. So I'm just going to start right here, put a nice healthy thick bead of glue. Same on the other side. If you want, you can also put it here, but I like using this as a reference in this case. And again, now I'm going to roll this up and around. And this step should feel very similar to what we did with our fuselage. Again, I'm lining up these tick marks right on both sides. That's going to give us the proper amount of down thrust that we need. And I'm going to hold this for about a minute to a minute and a half and let it fully dry. As you see, as we roll this around, it's going to meet up perfectly right in the middle. And we should be able to simply seam these together without any issues. Once we're happy with the fit, I'm just going to open this up a little bit and make sure I have plenty of hot glue in my glue gun. Place a bead of glue all the way across from one side to the other. And then also, I'm going to place a bead of glue on one of these edges. Now I can fold the one side down, let the shingle up just ever so slightly, and fold the other side down. Now all my attention is basically going to be making sure that I have these two pieces pushed together, that they're jointed nicely, and I'm going to hold this for about a minute to a minute and a half and let it fully dry. You can even, for the final stage of it drying, you can even flip it around on the table, smear off any extra residual glue you have, and hold that flat against the table if you want. Now that we have the main section of our nacelle done, we have this rear section that we want to join. And this is going to be very similar to what we did with the rear canopy section. All we simply need to do is rotate it down. We're going to kind of let it shingle underneath itself. And we're going to hold it in place. Just like that. It's always good to practice these folds just to kind of see how you want to hold it. Everyone's going to have a slightly different way of doing it. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure it goes down nice and flush. And for the first time, I'd recommend doing one side at a time. And at that point, as you get more used to it, you can do the whole surface. We'll do it the simple way. And just like before, I'm going to go down basically from the flat all the way down one side. I'm going to rotate this side up. And I'm just going to basically let my foam meet right where the leading edge goes. Got a little overzealous and I kind of ripped that foam there. But you can see there's my edge right there. I'm going to hold this until it dries and then do the other side. There's one side done. Again, we'll do the same process on the other side. I'm going to just take the glue from the curve down, let it rest for about 15 seconds. Then I'm just going to curve it in there and hold it for about a minute to a minute and a half. And there we go. As you can see, this is really taking its form here. You can see we have a beautiful front nacelle and we have the rear nacelle. And although this is basically square, you can see these radiused edges really give it that nice round appearance, but still keep it easy to build. Now, we're going to do this 4 more times here. And the nice thing is basically now that you've learned these steps, you can prepare all the rest of your pieces at one time. In other words, peeling the paper off the areas that need to be done, folding over your firewall doublers, and basically just getting everything ready to go. But I'm so impatient. I want to show you how good this looks on the wing. I'm just going to do a quick test fit and kind of give you the logic behind that. But don't rush ahead and glue them in just quite yet. You're going to see that there's only a little indent on one side and then there's a big indent on the other side. This gives us the ability to basically line this up. You're also going to notice that there's a little tick mark here. And when we put this in and press it forward, it slides in beautifully and gives a nice flush fit. At this point, let's go ahead and continue on, build the other 3 nacelles, and at that point, we'll work on getting them prepped and glued in. So by now you should have all 4 of the nacelles built. We have our 2 larger ones in the middle, and we have our 2 smaller ones on the outer point. Now you don't have to worry about which side you get on where, because basically there's different notches that are going to allow this to go evenly. I would recommend that you do the outside nacelles first. I accidentally did the inside nacelles first, which meant I had to basically visually line this up here. But doing the outside nacelles first, using the table as your friend, and then doing the inside ones will allow you to use the table to align everything properly. Let's go ahead and put our nacelles to the side. And we're going to bring our wing in, and we're going to start by mounting our center nacelles. So on our wing, you're going to see little tiny tick marks on the leading edge here. Those tick marks are going to be the indication of where our nacelle needs to go. We have our 1 tick mark here that's going to overlap our landing gear, and then we have our 2 tick marks on the outer edge here. Let's see here. There we go. And you're going to see when we line this up and push this tick mark in, that our nacelle is going to be pretty much flat on the table. A really easy way to make sure that both of these are straight is by when we mount these, we put this flat up on the table and use the table as our friend to basically hold this perpendicular. We're going to go ahead and practice that, and at that point we can come back and we can put glue on and we can glue these down. I'm only going to glue 1 nacelle down at a time, even though I'm going to use both nacelles to get my alignment. I'm going to face this towards you so it's a little bit easier to see, but I'd recommend that you basically go ahead and do this facing towards you. We got our little tick mark here. And our tick mark on the other side. the nice thing about our table here is we can put that downward pressure and it's really going to seat this in exactly where we need it. I'm going to use a little piece of tape here to lock down the one nacelle that we're not gluing down, just so I don't have to wrestle with it as I'm gluing the other one in. There's my little tick mark right there. And we'll tape that down. Cool. Once we confirm we're happy with the fit on everything, and that looks wonderful, I can take my nacelle and my hot glue gun, and I'm going to focus my bead of glue all the way going back. Now, just like we did with our canopy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my razor blade and I'm going to very carefully just take off a little bit of this edge so we have a nice flat surface. I don't have to make this completely smooth. All I simply need to do is hold this flat, and by the time we get to the end, we should be basically just making this area flat to the thickness of the foam in the rear. Usually one swipe is all we need. There we go. And that looks beautiful. I got plenty of glue in my hot glue gun, so I'm going to place a bead of glue right on the edge of the foam. I like to favor it in just a little bit. One final time here, I'm going to find that little tiny indicator. Set this down into place. Now I can rotate it up on the table, give it a nice firm push, and then with the flat of my hand, I'm going to hold it down until it's fully dry. You're going to see with just a little bit of pressure, this curves beautifully right around the wing, and it gives us a nice strong glue joint. Now I can follow back up here with basically a gap-filling bead of glue, which is not only going to finish this off and make it very smooth, but also give us a little extra strength. I'm going to do that at the end when I have all four of my nacelles down. Once this is dry, let's repeat the exact same process on the other side. Same process as before. Again, I'm just kind of keeping this knife flat against the surface of the paper. And as I get back towards the back, I'm ultimately just ending on the flat thickness of the foam. One last test fit. There's my mark. That looks wonderful. There we go. And again, right up against the table, nice and flat. And hold this firmly down. You definitely want to use the table as your friend for these steps because it's going to align your nacelles perfectly, and also make sure that your thrust angle is the same as well too. After you've done the outer nacelles, let's do the same process that we just demonstrated with the inner nacelles. Now that we have all our nacelles done, let's go ahead and put a bead of glue around all the edges here. It's going to be a beautiful filler, but also give us a lot of strength. Anytime I'm doing any kind of gap filling, I turn the temperature of my glue down to between 1/4 and just under 1/2. And that gives us a nice bubble-free smear that fills in gaps beautifully. I can just lick my finger. If I want, come right back around and smooth that out. Now that our nacelles are done, let's go ahead and prepare our motors to be able to install and also connect to our ESCs and power wires. So now that we're done with our nacelles, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the motors here. You're gonna notice I have my firewalls in the front, and I also have 4 of my budget beam motors here already hooked up. Now, we're gonna want 2 of our motors spinning clockwise and 2 of our motors spinning counterclockwise. The easiest way that we do this, and we are gonna test it, is I basically brought the motor lead straight out from the motor, and I have my ESC label up, and I have them directly plugged in. I did that on 2 of the motors, and on the other 2 of the motors, I have my labels pointing down. This should give us 1 motor spinning one direction and 1 motor spinning the other direction. We won't know which direction those motors are until we actually hook it up to our servo tester and verify it. We're gonna go ahead and do that right now. Our servo testers come in our crafty kit. They're super useful. I'm just gonna make sure that I plug this in on the outward side. So it says out, my signal, my power, and my ground are all lined up with each other. I'm also gonna make sure that I've rotated this all the way to the lower setting. So basically I've turned this towards the lower. Now when I plug this in, we'll make sure we're on manual. There we go. And when I wind this up, and this motor is spinning clockwise. So we know that this one's clockwise. We'll go ahead and test the next one. We're gonna do this for all 4 motors, just in case one of the leads is kind of hopped over when they're manufacturing it. We don't want to take that for granted. Although we can access our leads if we're very careful and be able to basically change that. There we go. Let's hold this down. And again, we have clockwise. So let's see if my theory holds true here. We have 2 clockwise, and now we'll go to counterclockwise. And that one's counterclockwise. And this one's counterclockwise as well. Now, really, in my opinion, does not matter which way we're gonna set this up, but what we do wanna have is we wanna have a clockwise and a counterclockwise motor on each of our sides. I like to keep the inside motors going 1 clockwise, 1 counterclockwise, and then basically the other side will be the same. So what we wanna do is we wanna stagger these so they'll do exactly that. So here we have clockwise, counterclockwise, counterclockwise, and clockwise. If at any point you get these wrong, don't worry about it. All we simply need to do is kind of fish the wire out, swap any 2 of the 3 wires, and we're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and line up my motors, and we can even, if we want to, mark inner left, inner right, outer left, outer right. It's completely up to you. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and set this right over top, and you can see that our ESC and everything pushes right through our air holes so they can pull through and be serviceable. There we go. Now, and earlier in the build, I was saying save our servo screws. That's because we're gonna go ahead and use these to screw down our X-Wings. We're gonna do this on all 4 of our motors, and then we're gonna be ready to glue them in. All right, all 4 of our motors are installed here. Feel free to pause the video at this moment. Make sure that your motors are configured just like what you see here. You're gonna see here we have label down, label up, label down, and label up. This is gonna give us proper counter rotation on the outer motors and also the inner motors. Now we can go ahead and bring our wing in, and we can start test fitting and gluing on our motor mounts. So you can see here I can easily access my power wires, and I can also easily access my servo leads just by simply reaching through the front nacelle. Let's go ahead and make our connections with our motors, and at that point we can tape our servo leads together and we can start tucking things in and then pulling them towards the center of the wing. I'm just gonna go ahead and face this towards the camera. I'll go ahead and work this over top here. We'll make connection with our power Y first. And I can simply just drop this right in. And make my connection with my servo wire. Always make sure you take time, especially when you're working on your motors, to make sure that you don't flip any of your wires. And as I get these kind of pulled through, I like to kind of route this in. And at that point, we have plenty of room to be able to tuck this down in. Once we're happy with the way everything lays, notice that I have my wires actually pointing up, kind of draping towards the top of the motor. This gives us the most room to be able to arrange our ESC so we can easily access it, but also that it gets the most airflow. You're gonna see that this lines up perfectly in the center with an even 1/8 inch gap all around. All we need to do is open it up, place a nice healthy bead of glue right around that ridge, and then we'll press it into place. I like to kind of wiggle the firewall around just to kind of spread out that glue a little bit, and then I'm going to center it up and then allow it to dry. We're going to do the exact same process now on the other 3 motors. All right, same process on the other 3 motors here. We're just going to simply grab our power Ys. I'm just going to work right down the line and work right down the line of motors here. There we go. And as we get these wires taped and routed, notice I'm just going to put some nice pressure on here to make sure that I can easily access my servo wire. And then I'm going to glue it down the same way I did with my other motor. And same process on the other side. I always like to make sure I work from the outer wingtip inward, because then I can easily pull the wires further and further in as I work towards the center. Now that we have our motors installed and glued in, we're gonna go ahead and make sure that our wiring is routed in such a way that we can easily pull out enough of this to be able to easily reach back into where our FT Aura 5 or your receiver is gonna be. That's gonna be behind the battery box and around the corner. So if you need to take the outer ESC and kind of tuck it in just a little bit where it still gets airflow, but you got plenty of leads, now would be the time to do it. We'll go ahead and go through all of our wire routing when we install our bomb bay. Cool. Now's the fun part. We get to go ahead and put on some of the decorative touches of our nacelles and finish those off. And at that point, we can put the wing aside and work on our bomb bay. The pieces that we're gonna need are gonna be the outer beauty rings and also our lower nacelle pieces. Let's go ahead and find those right now. We'll start with working on the outer beauty rings. Same process as before. We're gonna show you one and then just repeat the exact same process on the other 4. Now to prepare our beauty ring, we're gonna go ahead and remove one layer of the paper on one side, doesn't matter which one. And we're also going to cut a 45-degree bevel on the outer edge right here. Now because this piece is so thin, it's easy to just take this to the edge of the table and be able to hold it, keeping our fingers far away. And simply cut our 45-degree bevel in. There we go. Now to prepare our pieces, you're gonna notice that we have 4 bends on this. I simply like to just take my fingers and kind of give a little bit of a pre-curl right in those areas. And what you're going to notice is it makes a nice square. Now we can take this to any one of our 4 nacelles, and you're going to notice that when we line up the center tick mark, that this piece easily wraps around the outer edge beautifully. We're not going to do this all in one piece. We're going to do this the exact same way as we did the nose. Basically, we're going to do 2/3 on one side, and then we're going to come back and finish it off. I'm going to go ahead and face this towards me just to make it a little bit easier. And again, you can use a piece of tape. In this case, I'm just going to put it on the one side of the tick mark. I'm going to overlap that shingle, line up my tick mark, and hold it down. That's going to give me that extra set of hands that I need to basically give a beautiful form. Now I can open this up. I'm going to focus the majority of my glue from the far edge of the straight to the lower edge of the straight. We'll let it rest for about 15 seconds, get nice and tacky. Now we can flip it over. I'm going to very gently just hold it in place till it's dry. This step should be very familiar for you because it's exactly what we've done on the fuselage many times before. We're going to give this a good minute to fully dry. See that we still have plenty of time to make any kind of fine adjustments that we may need. And then we can finish up the other 2 sides. All right, and we're going to do the other side here. I'm going to go all the way down to the middle. Again, we're going to let that glue rest for about 15 seconds or so, get nice and tacky and thicken up just a little bit. Saves us on a little bit of the hold time. Right down. And while I'm holding that, I'll just go ahead and do the other side. Glue strings. All right, and just as easy as that, our beauty rings are now installed. We're going to do the exact same process now on the other 3 nacelles. Now that we have the front beauty rings on our nacelles, let's put our attention towards the lower nacelles. In your kit, you're going to see 4 pieces that you see that look just like this. Let's go ahead and weed out our cavities and also remove the paper from the areas that we need, and then we'll go on to our next step, which is assembling them. Again, just like the nacelles, the beauty rings, and many other steps on this airplane, once you do one, the other ones are the exact same process. Feel free to pause your video, make sure that all of your pieces look just like what you see here. What you should see on each nacelle is the paper removed from each side of the main piece and also the center cavity removed. Now all 4 of these nacelles are going to assemble the exact same way. Now one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to fold over and glue this piece first, because if we do that, it's not going to be able to jig up properly to make our outer skins fit. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a gentle curve using the table as our friend. You can either curve it this way, or you can simply hold it flat against the table and curve it up. But what we want to do is we want to give the foam a memory so it automatically starts matching up with this piece that you see here. By now you've curved a lot of foam. Everybody kind of has their own favorite techniques. The biggest thing is don't put sharp pressure down into the foam or you're going to crinkle it. You can see that we can easily form this piece up right around our nacelle former. Once we're happy with that, I'm going to focus the majority of my glue right on this skin here so I don't accidentally glue it to the table. Now I can bring it down to the table, rotate it 90 degrees, and I'm basically going to give it to about a minute and a half, holding exactly where it is until the glue is fully dry. And you can see this gives us a nice flush fit with the back of the skin and our former. Now we can go ahead and fold this over 180 degrees. I'm gonna go keep my glue favoring inside that area. If any glue does squeeze out, like what we have right here, just make sure that you wipe that off so it doesn't conflict with going into the nacelle. We're gonna just hold this shut until the glue's dried, and then we'll go ahead and do a test fit to show exactly how it installs in the nacelle, and then we can move on and build the other three. You're gonna notice that basically these only fit in one side. You're gonna notice that one side is thinner than the other side, and that's because of dihedral in the wing. So this side's gonna go here, and all I simply need to do is hook my doubler right underneath the nacelle. I'll push my finger down to the lightning hole and push it forward. And you can see that gives us a beautiful lower nacelle and a fantastic fit. Now, you can choose if you want to be able to kind of put all this together and glue it down real solid, but what I typically like to do is just use a couple drops of glue strategically, pretty much right around the middle here, and I'll tack this in place. That means anytime I want to be able to get more access to my ESCs, my wiring, or anything I want to get inside the nacelle, all I simply need to do is cut those 2 little drops of glue and pop it loose. It also makes this part replaceable, so you can easily replace it in the future if you need by tracing out the downloadable plans from the FTCA or tracing your part before you build it. Yeah, once I'm happy with the fit here, all I simply need to do is push my nacelle in place. I'm going to hold this in place, put a little drop of glue right under the middle here, and we're going to hold this down for about a minute to a minute and a half and let it fully dry. Cool. All right, our nacelle is installed. Let's go and do the exact same process on the other three. All right, friends, our main wing of the B-17 is now done here. We have our motors installed, we have our nacelles installed, we have our wings built, and everything's wired, ultimately ready for our next step, and that's going to be our next video. Our next video is going to cover my favorite thing of this whole B-17, and that's going to be the epic bomb bay. Along with that, we're also going to install our landing gear and ultimately take it out for its first flight. Thank you so much for being part of the Flite family and building along with me, and we'll see you next time.